Dive Podcast, straight talk on politics, national security, and America's future. With Robert Johnson and Linda Miller, we cut through the spin, tackle the tough issues, and give you the real story behind today's headlines. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell to stay informed.
Okay, let's jump right into some really significant diplomatic developments today.
Yeah, there's a lot happening.
We're seeing potential for high-level talks involving the U.S. president, Russia's president, and Ukraine.
And importantly, direct talks between Russia and Ukraine just happened in Istanbul. First time since 2022.
Right. So today, we want to really get a clear picture of the conditions, the topics shaping these potential, top-level conversations.
Well, it's interesting looking at the conditions being spelled out, especially around a possible meeting between Russia's president and Ukraine's president.
Yeah, Moscow has been quite clear on that.
The press secretary, Peskov, basically said a meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy is possible.
Yeah.
But there's a catch.
The delegations have to agree on specifics first. That's the key condition.
Exactly. The presidential meeting would only happen after that groundwork is laid. It's a result, not a starting point for them.
And they also brought up the issue of who on the Ukrainian side would actually sign any potential documents.
Right. That suggests, well, maybe some concern from Moscow about legitimacy, about who has the mandate.
Which ties into that background issue, doesn't it? Moscow had previously questioned President Zelensky's legitimacy, his term having expired a year ago.
While Ukraine maintains, he's the legal head of state until elections are possible, which they aren't under martial law.
So that difference in perspective definitely adds a layer of complexity.
It does. And it's worth noting, Ukraine did ask for that direct presidential meeting during the Istanbul talks on May 16th. Moscow acknowledged the request.
Okay, so the request is on the table, but subject to those delegation-level agreements.
Precisely. It shows a path, maybe, but a potentially tricky one.
Now, those Istanbul talks, they weren't just about a potential presidential summit, were they? Other things came out of that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Beyond that request, the delegations announced plans for a pretty big prisoner exchange.
The 1,000 for 1,000 swap.
Yes, supposedly happening in the near future. If that goes ahead, it would be a major humanitarian step.
Absolutely. And they also talked about looking towards a ceasefire.
They did, discussing how to develop a vision for one. And interestingly, both sides apparently agreed to exchange lists of conditions for a truce.
So exchanging lists, that sounds like an initial step at least.
It suggests some willingness, at that delegation level anyway, to explore what a ceasefire might actually look like.
But then you look at the details that reportedly came out of Istanbul, especially from Bloomberg sources, and the hurdles look pretty high.
Very high. According to those reports, Russia's demands are significant.
Like what?
Well, withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the regions Russia now claims. Neutral status for Ukraine. No foreign troops or WMDs hosted there.
And the really big ones, recognition of Russian control over Crimea, Sevastopol, the 4 newer regions.
And international recognition of those as Russian territory. Plus Ukraine abandoning any demands for reparations.
Wow. Those are fundamental issues. Territorial integrity, security guarantees.
Exactly. It really underscores the huge gap between their objectives. The prisoner exchange talk is positive, the ceasefire discussion, but these core political and territorial issues deeply entrenched.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit to the U.S. involvement. There's talk of a meeting between the U.S. president and Russia's president. That seems like another key piece here.
It really does. Secretary of State Rubio expressed hope recently that a meeting between President Trump and President Putin could happen soon.
And the U.S. president himself has said he wants that meeting.
Yeah, publicly stated he desires it, wants it as soon as possible.
So the willingness seems to be there from the U.S. side. What about making it happen, the practicalities?
Well, the details, time, place, agendas, still need working out. Secretary Rubio said the mechanics will require little work. But reports also suggest the Russian side is ready for high-level talks too.
And the U.S. president seems to believe these direct talks are crucial. Didn't he call them the only chance to end the conflict?
He did. That's a very strong statement. It suggests a real belief in, personal diplomacy at the top level to break the deadlock.
What's the Kremlin's take on that?
They've said top-level talks are necessary for bilateral relations and global issues like Ukraine. But they also stress these things need significant preparation.
Right. Not something you just jump into.
Exactly.
And then, right after the Istanbul talks, the U.S. president announced he was planning to make some calls.
Yes, a significant announcement. His intention was to call Russia's President Putin on May 19th.
To discuss what specifically?
2 main things: a ceasefire Ukraine and trade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that call was supposed to be followed by others.
Reportedly, yes. Calls with Ukraine's President Zelenskyy, and then a joint call with Zelenskyy and some NATO allies. The Kremlin did confirm they were prepping for the call with Putin.
And the U.S. president sounded hopeful about that call.
Expressed hope it would be productive, maybe lead to a ceasefire agreement. We should remember, they have spoken before recently phone calls back in February and March.
Now, Secretary Rubio also mentioned a U.S. plan.
Correct. He said the U.S. has put forward a strong peace plan for Ukraine.
And he welcomed the prisoner exchange news from Istanbul.
Yes, saw it as a positive step, and he urged not to miss what he called a huge opportunity to end the conflict that arose after those Istanbul talks.
So a sense of urgency there. Did he speak directly with his Russian counterpart?
He did. Spoke with Foreign Minister Lavrov on May 17th, the day right after the Istanbul negotiations.
What came out of that conversation?
Well, Lavrov reportedly noted Ukraine agreed to the Istanbul talks with American help, and he affirmed Moscow's readiness to keep working with the U.S.
And the U.S. State Department said they discussed the American peace plan.
That's right. They discussed that plan specifically.
Do we know anything about what's in this U.S. plan?
Some details have emerged. It's apparently a list of 22 points, reportedly put together after talks involving the U.S., Ukraine, and European reps in London late last month in April.
Okay, 22 points. Any specifics?
NBC News reported the plan includes a ceasefire, naturally. But also, interestingly, it apparently addresses Russia's demand about the U.S. not supporting Ukraine's entry into NATO.
So potentially tackling one of Moscow's core security concerns head-on.
It seems that way, yeah. Suggests a possible avenue for negotiation, or at least acknowledging that key Russian point.
And just to circle back to that planned phone call between the U.S. president and Russia's president on May 19th.
Right, the one focused on ceasefire and trade.
The U.S. president himself gave specifics on the agenda.
Yes, announced it on Truth Social. Two main topics: ceasefire, trade. He even gave the time 10:00 a.m. Washington, 5:00 p.m. Moscow.
And mentioned the follow-up calls again?
Correct, with President Zelenskyy and then the joint call with Zelenskyy and some NATO members. He also repeated his hope for a ceasefire announcement, an end to what he called a very brutal war that never should have started.
Okay, so summing up where things stand,
Yeah.
a potential Putin-Zelenskyy meeting, but it really depends on their delegations making progress first.
And those Istanbul talks yielded the prisoner exchange plan, but also revealed those very tough Russian demands.
Meanwhile, the U.S. president wants to meet Russia's president, had that specific call scheduled about ceasefire and trade.
And the U.S. has its own strong peace plan on the table, trying to navigate this complex situation.
Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We're here to make things clear. New episodes every day.